Wang Lin had never been one to believe in miracles, but that didn't stop him from hoping for something like it. At 22, just finishing up his senior year at a mid-tier university in Beijing, his life had mostly been an unremarkable cycle of lectures, homework, and the occasional binge-watching marathon. In short, it was a life marked by mediocrity. But mediocrity, as far as he was concerned, wasn't such a bad thing. Sure, he didn't have a 4.0 GPA, didn't have a girlfriend, and wasn't destined to become a tech CEO or a famous scientist. But there was something comforting about knowing where you stood. That is, until the email came. Dear Wang Lin, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for an advanced genetic research program that promises to enhance human physical and cognitive abilities. Your participation will involve cutting-edge technology and has the potential to dramatically improve your strength, agility, and sensory perceptions. Wang Lin blinked at the screen of his laptop, barely able to process what he was reading. It was like one of those spam emails promising you an inheritance from a Nigerian prince, except this one sounded, well, official. There were fancy logos, bold letters, and even a confidential stamp on the subject line, genetic enhancement. He chuckled to himself. Sure, why not? Who wouldn't want to become a superhero? His best friend, Zhang Wei, was the first to hear the news. They were sitting in their usual spot on campus, a bench by the dorms where the sun barely made it through the trees, giving everything a quiet, comfortable vibe. Hey, I got this email about some crazy genetic research, Wang Lin said, tossing his phone onto the table. Zhang Wei raised an eyebrow. What, like a DNA test or something? You planning to find out you're related to Genghis Khan? Wang Lin laughed. Nah, it's something a lot crazier. They're offering to, get this, enhance my strength, agility, and even my vision. Basically, they're going to turn me into an upgraded human. Like one of those superheroes you see in movies. They're even paying for it. Zhang Wei blinked, then shook his head. Wait, hold on. They're paying you for what? To turn you into some lab rat? It's a clinical trial, Wang Lin explained, clearly excited. They're saying I'll have the reflexes of a cheetah, the eyesight of an eagle, and the strength of an ant. Zhang Wei's mouth twitched. The strength of an ant? What is that, like lifting a grain of rice with one finger? Wang Lin waved him off. No, no. It's more about raw strength. Like, lifting tons of weight without breaking a sweat. And the best part? They're offering money. I'm talking a lot of money, man. Enough to pay off my student loans and still have enough left to buy a decent car. Zhang Wei snorted. Yeah, sure. But let me get this straight. You're about to sign up for some sketchy gene editing experiment, and you don't think there's anything weird about that? No one ever thinks they're going to turn into a mutant until it's too late. Next thing you know, you're on the run from some secret government agency. Pfft, that's just science fiction nonsense, Wang Lin scoffed, trying to suppress his grin. Besides, what could possibly go wrong? I'll get stronger, faster, smarter, who wouldn't want that? Zhang Wei stared at him, eyes wide. I'm telling you, man, the risks outweigh the benefits. You should think about it. But Wang Lin didn't think much further. He wasn't particularly worried about his health, and the potential perks outweighed any vague fears he might have. So, with a few clicks, he confirmed his participation. The money came through shortly after. And that was how Wang Lin found himself in the sterile white halls of a private clinic, his heart beating with a nervous anticipation he couldn't quite explain. The clinic was as impressive as it was intimidating. The walls were lined with sleek, modern art, the floors glimmered with an almost unnatural sheen, and the staff, doctors and scientists in white lab coats, moved with a quiet, efficient urgency. Wang Lin had expected something less clinical. He felt like an object on an assembly line, waiting to be processed. Mr. Wang, a voice broke his thoughts. He looked up to see Dr. Liu, the lead scientist. She had sharp features, glasses perched on her nose, and a clipboard in hand. "We'll begin shortly. The procedure is simple, but you must remain calm. We've done extensive research on the gene splicing process, and it's completely safe." "Safe? You're editing my genes." "Sounds like something out of a horror movie," Wang Lin joked, trying to mask his rising unease. Doctor Lu smiled. "That's a common reaction. But rest assured, the only thing you'll experience is a temporary sensation of heat in your body as the genetic modifications are activated. There may be some slight muscle soreness and minor nausea, but those are temporary side effects." Wang Lin nodded, then lay back onto the examination table. "I guess I can deal with that. Let's make me a superhero, then." The next few hours passed in a blur. Needles were inserted, vials of blood were taken, and strange machines hummed and clicked around him. He had trouble keeping his eyes open as the anesthetic took hold. But in his half-conscious state, he couldn't shake the thought that something about this felt wrong. Still, his mind kept wandering to the future. Eagle vision. Super strength. Maybe I'll finally be able to stand out. When he awoke, the procedure was over. Dr. Lu and her team stood nearby, their expressions unreadable. "You did well, Mr. Wang," Dr. Lu said, her voice soft but professional. "We've completed the enhancement. You may experience some discomfort in the next 24 hours as your body adjusts to the changes. Please stay in the clinic for observation for the next 2 days. We'll monitor your progress." The first sign that something was wrong came the following morning. Wang Lin felt different. Not just physically, but mentally too. It was as if a switch had been flipped. His senses were heightened, like he could hear a fly buzzing in the next room, or the faintest whisper of the wind outside. His eyesight was sharper, clearer. When he looked at his hand, he could count the individual hairs on his knuckles, but it was the speed that astounded him. He was moving faster than he'd ever thought possible. When he got up to stretch, he felt a surge of power in his legs. They were strong, almost too strong. His body felt like a finely tuned machine, but there was a sense of raw energy beneath the surface. He tried to calm himself, but his heart raced. "No big deal. It's just the effects kicking in," he reasoned. He took a deep breath and walked to the clinic's small gym. A few of the other test subjects were there, but no one seemed to notice him as he approached the weights. The first time he tried to lift a dumbbell, he almost threw it through the ceiling. His reflexes were so fast, his body so powerful, that his own movements caught him off guard. He adjusted quickly, and with a deep breath, he gripped the weight again. This time, he lifted it easily. And then another. And then he moved on to the heavier weights. By the time Dr. Lu and her team returned for their daily check-in, Wang Lin had broken every gym record. They watched him lift twice his body weight with ease, his muscles rippling with energy. "Remarkable," Dr. Lu said with an approving nod. "You're adjusting well." Wang Lin's body felt like it was on fire. It was the good kind of fire, the kind that came with power, that sweet surge of raw, unfiltered energy that pulsed in his muscles and coursed through his veins. But at the same time, there was something off, something jagged underneath it all. His mind buzzed with every sensation, his senses heightened to the point of madness. The world felt too sharp, too vivid, as if every detail was forcing itself into his consciousness, clamoring for attention. He could hear a pin drop in the hallway outside, the faint scrape of a chair in a distant classroom, even the barely audible hum of the clinic's air conditioning. But it wasn't just hearing. It was seeing too. His vision had become so precise, so acute, that he could read a textbook from across the room with no effort at all. He could spot the smallest movement, a fluttering leaf in the wind, a shifting shadow in the corner of his eye, and instinctively track it like a hawk focusing on prey. It was thrilling, overwhelming, and just a little bit terrifying. At first, the changes had felt like a dream come true. The strength, the speed, the clarity of mind, it was everything he'd wanted. But now, it was becoming clear that there was something darker lurking beneath this transformation. The power he had gained was starting to feel like a cage, trapping him inside his own body. He had no control over it, and then came the rage. It started out small, a flicker of irritation when the staff at the clinic made him wait for too long. But it quickly escalated. One morning, as he waited in the hallway for a routine checkup, a nurse accidentally bumped into him, her elbow jabbing into his ribs. It wasn't hard, certainly not hard enough to hurt, but something inside him snapped. His fingers clenched into fists, his nails biting into his palm. His heart thudded, louder than it ever had before, like a drum pounding in his chest. He wanted to lash out, to punch the nurse, to do something. The urge was primal, uncontrollable. For a split second, he felt like an animal, ready to pounce. His breath came fast, his vision blurring with the anger that coursed through him. It was like there was an entirely different person inside him, something else, something not quite human. He turned away, forcing himself to take deep, slow breaths. He had to calm down. He had to remember who he was. But even as he pushed the feelings away, he knew that they were still there, simmering beneath the surface. The animal was waking up. Over the next few days, the changes only grew worse. Wang Lin couldn't shake the feeling that his emotions were no longer his own. He was snapping at people for no reason, becoming irritable, short-tempered. At first, he chalked it up to stress, the pressure of the experiment and the overwhelming intensity of his new abilities. But the more he tried to control it, the more the animal inside him seemed to take charge. He was having trouble sleeping. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, heart racing, as if some part of him was trying to escape. He would hear noises that weren't there, see things that weren't real. At one point, he thought he saw a shadow move across the room, but when he turned on the light, there was nothing there. His muscles ached from the constant tension, and he found himself pacing the halls of the clinic, unable to sit still for more than a few minutes at a time. It wasn't just physical anymore. His mind was starting to fragment. He was thinking in terms of instincts now. He could almost hear the call of the wild, that primal, animalistic part of him that told him to hunt, to fight, to survive. It was worse when he was around people. At first, he had enjoyed the attention, his friends, the scientists, even strangers on the street, all marveling at his new abilities. But now, he hated it. Every time someone looked at him, he felt like they were too close, like their presence was a threat. He would tense up, ready to lash out, ready to defend himself against imagined enemies. He had to fight the urge to chase them away, to make them run. It was Zhang Wei who first noticed something was wrong. They had been friends since high school, and over the years, he'd come to know Wang Lin better than anyone. So when they met for coffee one afternoon, Zhang Wei immediately picked up on the changes in his friend. "You're not looking so good, man," he said, taking a sip of his drink and studying Wang Lin with a concerned frown. "You haven't been sleeping, have you?" Wang Lin forced a smile, trying to downplay it. "I'm fine, just a little tired. It's been a lot of adjusting, you know." Zhang Wei didn't buy it. "You look like you're about to explode. You're jittery, and your eyes are all over the place. And what's with the way you're clenching your fists?" Wang Lin blinked, realizing that he was, indeed, tightening his hands into white-knuckled fists. He let go, trying to calm himself. But the truth was, he was on edge, all the time. His body felt like it was a live wire, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. "I don't know, Wei," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "It's just, the changes. I thought it would be great, but it's like I'm losing control. Every time I feel something, anger, fear, even excitement, it's like my body wants to react in ways I can't stop. I almost hurt someone the other day." Zhang Wei's expression darkened. "What? Hurt someone? Dude, what the hell are you talking about?" "I don't know. I was just frustrated, you know. And I snapped. It was like my body was acting on its own. I don't know how to explain it. Zhang Wei stared at him, his brow furrowing with concern. Wang Lin, this isn't normal. You need to get out of there, man. This is messed up. Maybe the experiment, it's too late for that, Wang Lin interrupted, his voice tighter than he intended. I can't go back. I'm already in too deep. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, causing a few heads to turn in their direction. Wang Lin froze, his heart pounding. He felt his body tensing again, that sharp edge of anger flaring up in him. I gotta go, he said quickly, turning toward the door. Wang Lin, wait. Zhang Wei called after him, but Wang Lin didn't stop. He needed to get out of there. He needed to run. That night, Wang Lin couldn't sleep. His mind was racing, every thought too fast to catch, every impulse too strong to control. He paced back and forth in his small apartment, his eyes darting to the windows, the door, the walls. His skin itched, his muscles burned. Every little sound felt like a threat, like something was coming for him. He couldn't stop the thoughts that kept creeping in. What if I'm becoming something else? What if I'm losing myself? He tried to focus, tried to ground himself. But every time he closed his eyes, the animal instincts inside him flared up. The sensation of his heightened senses overwhelmed him, and all he could think about was hunting, finding something to chase, something to fight, and then, as if his body had taken over completely, he was out the door. The night air was cool against his skin, but the heat in his veins burned hotter. He didn't know where he was going, but he needed to move. He ran, faster than he'd ever run before, through the streets, his body flowing with the grace of a predator. He could hear his breath, steady and rhythmic, but it was drowned out by the thunder of his pulse in his ears. He ran until he couldn't anymore, until his legs gave out beneath him. And when he finally collapsed onto the grass in a park, panting, his mind was clearer than it had been in days. But the relief was fleeting. The animal still prowled inside him, waiting. The next morning, he called Zhang Wei. I need help, he said simply. I don't know how much longer I can keep it together. The next few days felt like a blur, like the world around Wang Lin had been stripped of its normal rhythm. He was moving through life on autopilot, his mind fogged with confusion and desperation. The animal inside him was waking up more with every passing hour. He could feel it, clawing at the edges of his consciousness, a constant low hum beneath his thoughts. Zhang Wei had been there, of course, trying to help, but he didn't understand. No one could. How could they? How could anyone grasp what it felt like to be slowly consumed by something else, something that wasn't quite human? Wang Lin had always prided himself on being in control of his own life, of his own body, but now that control was slipping through his fingers like sand. Zhang Wei kept pushing him to see Dr. Liu again, to stop the experiment before things got worse, but Wang Lin didn't want to go back to the clinic. He didn't want more needles in his skin, more tests, more promises of fixes that might never come. He'd already given up so much, and yet it still wasn't enough. The powers he'd gained had come with a price, and now he was starting to realize just how steep that price was. The animal inside him wasn't just a metaphor. It was real. He could feel it in his muscles, in his bones. Every movement was heightened, everything was amplified. When he looked at something, he could see it in perfect detail, every curve, every texture, every shadow. It was like the world had been sharpened into focus, and yet it was also painfully overwhelming. He couldn't look at anything without analyzing it, instinctively calculating its weaknesses, its potential. And when people came too close, his breath quickened, his heart raced, his fists clenched. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. His body screamed at him to react, to lash out, to dominate, and it wasn't just when people were near. The anger came out of nowhere. Little things set him off, a dropped pen, a misstep, a delayed train. His temper flared, and for a few moments, it felt like his humanity was slipping away, replaced by something animal, something dangerous. Zhang Wei had stopped trying to reason with him after their last argument. Wang Lin didn't know if it was because he was tired of trying, or because he knew there was nothing he could say that would make Wang Lin listen. The truth was, Wang Lin had already started to pull away from everyone. He couldn't afford to let them see what was happening to him. He couldn't risk getting too close to anyone, not when the animal inside him was so unpredictable. It was late one night when it all came to a head. Wang Lin had been pacing his small apartment again, unable to sit still, his mind a constant whirlpool of frustration and confusion. The walls seemed to close in on him, the silence too loud, the stillness too suffocating. His senses were on edge. Every sound was like a gunshot, every shadow a potential threat. The beast inside him was just a breath away from breaking free. He couldn't take it anymore. With a growl of frustration, he shoved the door open and stepped out into the night, his muscles rippling with the stored-up energy that had nowhere to go. He was running again, without thinking, without purpose. Just running. His feet hit the pavement hard, faster than he'd ever moved before. The wind rushed past him, the world a blur of streetlights and shadows. His body was a machine, his mind was somewhere else. Somewhere darker. He found himself at the edge of the city, near a park he used to visit as a child. The air was cooler here, less suffocating. The trees loomed over him like silent sentinels, their branches swaying in the wind. For a moment, it was peaceful. But then the familiar itch returned, the heat in his veins, the urge to hunt. It was at that moment that he heard it. A rustling in the bushes. His heart skipped a beat, and his body instinctively tensed, coiling like a spring. His eyes locked onto the source of the sound. His mind screamed at him to stop, to walk away, but his body was already moving. It was a small animal, a squirrel, darting out of the underbrush. Wang Lin's vision snapped to focus, and in that instant, the world slowed down. He could see the animal's every movement, the twitch of its fur, the rapid flicker of its eyes. His senses heightened even more, and before he could stop himself, his legs were moving, faster than humanly possible. The chase was on. He was a blur of motion, bounding through the trees, his feet barely touching the ground. His breath came in sharp, quick gasps, his body a machine driven by instinct. He could hear the squirrel's frantic movements, feel its fear in the air. He was closing in on it. It was a hunt that he was hunting. In the span of a few seconds, he had closed the distance, leaping forward, his hand stretching out to grab the animal. It was only at the last moment that he realized what he was doing. But it was too late. His fingers closed around the squirrel's tiny body with terrifying force, and the world snapped back into focus. He stood there, his breath ragged, his chest heaving with the exertion, staring down at the creature in his hands. It wasn't the animal's life that shook him, it was the fact that he wanted it. He had hunted it, chased it down with the precision and single-mindedness of a predator. And he had enjoyed it. It was a moment of clarity that hit him like a punch to the gut. The animal inside him wasn't just a passing sensation. It wasn't something that could be ignored or tamed. It was becoming him. The more he fought it, the more it controlled him. His instincts, his urges, his violent impulses, they weren't the side effects of the experiment. They were the real cost of his transformation. Wang Lin dropped the squirrel, and it scampered away, its tiny heart still racing from the terror. He watched it go, his mind reeling with what he had just done. His body was still trembling, the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He wasn't sure if he was disgusted, horrified, or just numb, but one thing was clear, he couldn't go back to the life he had before. He wasn't the same person anymore. He couldn't pretend to be. The next day, Dr. Liu called. She had been trying to reach him for hours, her voice strained when he finally answered. "Mr. Wang," she said, "we've been monitoring your progress, and we've noticed some troubling behavior. We need you to come in for another session. The enhancements are working, perhaps too well. You're exhibiting signs of aggression and uncontrolled impulses. We need to assess the situation before it escalates further." Wang Lin didn't say anything for a long moment. He stared at the phone, the words echoing in his mind. He had no interest in returning to the clinic, no desire to sit in front of Dr. Liu and pretend everything was okay. But he also knew that he couldn't live like this forever. He couldn't live with the animal inside him, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the next hunt, the next fight, the next explosion of violence. "What if I don't come back?" he asked quietly. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Dr. Liu finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost understanding. "I don't think you have much of a choice, Mr. Wang. You've already crossed a line. If you don't come back, the changes may become permanent, irreversible." For the first time, Wang Lin didn't know what to do. He didn't know who he was anymore, or what he had become. He could feel the animal inside him, pushing against the walls of his mind, eager to break free, and deep down, he knew that the price of evolution, this price, was something he might never be able to pay.